What do the Islamist leaders plan for the country? Then Q&A.
Tonight, a shortage of junior doctors putting parts of the state's health system under strain.
Well, we think it's around 40 to 50 key doctors in our system that we're short right now.
Also tonight, more record COVID numbers in New South Wales as the state's regional lockdown is extended. The rescue mission in Afghanistan ramps up with a second flight into Kabul today. And the Crows' David McKay joins the list of player retirements this weekend. Good evening, Richard Davies with ABC News. There are concerns a shortage of junior doctors in Adelaide will impact patient care across the hospital network. The hiring of overseas trainees to work in the state's public health system has been hampered by the pandemic, with estimates at least 40 doctors are needed. But the Health Minister says staff are coming, and he's ruled out cuts to the opening hours of one major Adelaide hospital as it struggles to fill its roster.
A symptom of a stretched health system. Ambulances last night ramped outside the Royal Adelaide's emergency department, and a lack of junior doctors inside public hospitals is starting to cause headaches.
Well, we think it's around 40 to 50 key doctors in our system that we're short right now. So it's very difficult to keep services operating when we've got such staff shortages.
SA Health heavily recruits trainee doctors from overseas, a task that's been made harder by COVID.
Oh, it's a foreseeable national issue, but other jurisdictions have taken proactive measures to avoid a crisis.
Like the Western Australian government. It recently moved to hire more than 200 doctors from England and Ireland. But with staff numbers low in Adelaide, the Doctors' Union says drastic measures have been looked at for one emergency department.
We understand that there's an option being considered where Queen Elizabeth closes at 5 p.m.
We are very determined to maintain the full 24/7 coverage of the QEH Emergency Department. I would rule that out.
In an email obtained by ABC News, SA Health Chief Executive Officer Chris McGowan says it's a very high priority for the health system to get new doctors into the state. Another email from a senior health bureaucrat says charter flights are being explored to bring in staff from Europe. The Health Minister says the influx of doctors has started.
This week we're bringing in 22. We're working to bring in more in the weeks and months ahead. We've got dozens of medical practitioners who are ready, willing and able to come. We just need to get them here.
But the shortages go beyond the city and suburbs.
Our rural areas are shortchanged at the best of times. You know, we need to have a strategy that takes them into account as well.
Treatment which will take time to develop. Rory McLaren, ABC News, Adelaide.
It's been another disastrous COVID day in New South Wales, with 681 people contracting the virus in the past 24 hours. And a man in his 80s with underlying health conditions has died. The state's regional lockdown has been extended as the virus spreads. Authorities are worried about the growing cases, particularly in the vulnerable communities in the state's west.
There are only a few reasons to be out and about in Wilcannia right now. One is to get vaccinated, another is to be tested for COVID-19.
We call on anyone who has been in or near Wilcannia in recent days to please get tested.
Another 3 cases have been detected in the small outback town. 130 people received vaccinations here so far. With often large households isolating, local support services are worried that tensions could rise within homes.
If there's lack of food, if there's lack of space and all kinds of stuff, been worried about that.
5 kilometres gets us to the other end of town. It doesn't get us the 200 kilometres to the big Coles or Woolworths store.
Volunteers are delivering care packages.
We want to support people who are positive cases and so in isolation because they're really struggling.
There were 21 cases in Dubbo and 4 in Mudgee, bringing the region's total to 167.
Out of those 4 patients in hospital, 1 of those is in intensive care.
There's now a greater geographical spread of cases to places like Goulburn, Kempsey and Queanbeyan, and virus fragments have been found in sewage in Foster, Yamba and Baddo Bay. So the statewide lockdown is being extended, at this point, until the end of next week.
It is right that we stay in front of the curve, that we stay in front of the spread, and we keep regional and rural New South Wales in lockdown.
People living in the west and northwest are highly connected, and travelling between towns is usually common.
No one had been vaccinated, and it was not because of hesitancy, it's because we didn't even have the choice to be vaccinated.
The ADF have been working in Dubbo, but their vaccination teams are still on the way.
We're very happy to be here. We hope that we can assist the community in recovering from this pandemic.
At the moment, regional New South Wales needs all the help it can get. Bill Ormond, ABC News, Wilcannia.
Victoria has recorded its highest number of COVID cases in nearly 12 months, but the vast majority were already in isolation. 57 new cases were recorded, the most since the tail end of Victoria's second wave last year. 3 mystery cases were recorded, but 44 of the 57 new infections were in quarantine for their entire infectious period.
41 of those 44 are day 13 tests, so it's the system working exactly as it should. We thank the many tens of thousands of people who are currently tucked away.
Darwin's 3-day lockdown has ended after another day of no new cases, but the stay-at-home order in Katherine was extended for 24 hours after wastewater testing detected the virus there. In the ACT, 16 new cases were recorded, 9 are yet to be linked to any existing cluster. Another 76 Australians and Afghan nationals have been evacuated from Kabul, but this time by the British Air Force. The federal government has now joined forces with allies to rescue as many people as possible. And as political editor Andrew Probyn explains, the first group of evacuees will soon be on the way to Australia.
Kabul airport is surrounded, the only place in Afghanistan not under Taliban control. But getting in, a frightening ordeal. An Australian mother and daughter caught at a Taliban roadblock, among the many desperate to board evacuation flights out of the Afghan capital.
76 people were evacuated, including Australian citizens and Afghan visa holders. They have been transferred to our base in Al Minhad.
The second group evacuated. They hitched a lift on a British RAF plane, allies in the 20-year war coordinating a mass airlift.
We're also working with other countries now to share lists of potential passengers.
Giant Australian Globemaster C-17s readying in Dubai for their turn as early as tonight.
Slots are being allotted for to get on the ground and to unload and upload and get out.
With countries scrambling to get their people out, recriminations continue over a botched military exit.
No mistakes? No, the idea that somehow there's a way to have gotten out without chaos ensuing, I don't know how that happens.
When the US and its allies leave for good, responsibility won't end. Canada and Britain pledging to take 20,000 Afghan refugees each over coming years.
The sacrifice in Afghanistan is seared into our national consciousness.
Australia's promising to take 3,000 Afghan refugees this financial year.
We see that as a floor, not as a ceiling.
The solution here isn't going to be evacuation flight. It's going to be how we deal with the vast humanitarian needs that already exist in Afghanistan.
On Scott Morrison's desk is a model of an asylum seeker boat with the words, "I stopped these." That's a memento from his time as Immigration Minister. Now Prime Minister, he knows he will be judged on his generosity towards people whose nation Australia spent 20 years trying to rebuild. Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
And ABC reporter Tom Joyner is in Dubai, and I asked him for the latest on those Mercy flights.
Well, Richard, a number of European countries and, of course, the Australian Defence Force have been using an airbase operated by the United Arab Emirates military just outside of Dubai, where I am. Now, the ADF has 4 aircraft on the ground here. One of them is used for refuelling, but 2 of them are C-17 Globemasters. They're those enormous planes that you see ferrying cargo and personnel in and out of dangerous conflict zones. Now, from where I'm standing in Dubai over to Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan, it's just a short flight over the Gulf. But so far, the ADF's only been able to rescue 100 people from Kabul on 1 Australian evacuation flight and 1 British flight. That's of the total 600 that the Australian government had hoped to eventually evacuate. Now, the Australian government hopes that will change over the next 24 hours as it tries to ramp up evacuation missions into Kabul. But the chief, or one of the chief concerns, still remains the security situation on the ground in Kabul's airport there, where a number of Australians and Afghans hoping to be evacuated believe that it might be very difficult still to get into the airport in the first place to make those flights. And if they can't, well, then they face a very uncertain and dangerous next couple of weeks and months under Taliban rule.
A rare early sign of dissent. Protesters in Jalalabad replaced the Taliban flag with Afghanistan's tricolour ahead of the country's Independence Day.
You can hit me with 30 bullets, kill me. I will sacrifice my life for this flag.
Taliban fighters responded with gunfire, killing at least 3 people and injuring more. Speaking from exile in the United Arab Emirates, Ashraf Ghani said he left to avoid bloodshed.
Don't believe those who say your president sold you out and fled. I left Afghanistan in a vest, shoes, and a t-shirt.
Denying accusations, he took large sums of money from state funds with him.
We failed in politics. But which politics? It was the failure of the Taliban leadership and also the political failure of international allies.
Ashraf Ghani was welcomed here on humanitarian grounds. The United Arab Emirates has become a hub for the race to evacuate foreign citizens and some Afghan nationals from Kabul, although spots on the tarmac are limited and landing is really dependent on the weather. The international effort now has just days, not weeks, to try and get out as many people as possible.
Quite frankly, it's obvious we're not close to where we want to be in terms of getting the numbers through.
The United States is focusing on securing Kabul's airport, but as for anything beyond that...
I don't have the capability to go out and extend operations currently into Kabul.
Taliban boots are firmly on the ground and in the palace. The Haqqani militant group meeting with former Afghan President Hamid Karzai. The movement's leader, Mullah Baradar, has arrived in the group's spiritual home of Kandahar, as plans are afoot to set up a government.
The system of the government is clear. That is an Islamic government. Sharia law would be, of course, there would be no democratic system at all, because it doesn't have any base in our country.
Many Afghans aren't taking any chances.
They behead people. There's no work in Afghanistan, and we lost our homes.
This group walked into Iran in the hopes of seeking safety in Turkey. Their future's just as uncertain as their nations. Tom Joyner, ABC News, Dubai.
Australia's major allies are trying to coax the federal government into taking more action to cut greenhouse gas emissions ahead of global climate talks in Glasgow in November. Prime Minister Scott Morrison has shown no willingness to lift the nation's target of cutting emissions by 26 to 28% by 2030. But he's been inching towards adopting the goal of reaching net zero emissions by 2050. However, countries, including the US and UK, say that's not enough, with more action needed in the next 10 years.
Most recently, the IPCC suggests that we need a much more aggressive total from all nations. So in my mind, it would be really helpful to see Australia step forward with a more ambitious effort.
The major economies, the big emitters, are absolutely critical, and I urge Australia to step up with big, bold commitments ahead of COP26 in November.
Labor's climate spokesman Chris Bowen has endorsed stronger emissions cuts between now and 2030, but won't nominate a target. The man who murdered his funny and intelligent housemate following a dispute over a bad internet connection should feel the full effect of the law, his family has told an Adelaide court. Nikola Milosevic apologised, saying he regrets what he's done but didn't intend to kill him. Claire Campbell reports.
Danny Barber was funny, kind, curious and intelligent, his family has told the Supreme Court, before drugs ruined his life and he was killed in a merciless and senseless homicide in August 2019. 39-year-old Nikola Milosevic was found guilty earlier this year of murdering Mr Barber at their North Plympton share house. Under the influence of methamphetamine and cannabis, Milosevic struck Mr Barber more than 30 times using a baseball bat, wheelie bin and bicycle. He inflicted unimaginable pain and suffering on my son, Mr Barber's mother told the court. The assault went on for hours and no one bothered to get help for Danny until it was too late. His sister said knowing that Danny need not have died and did so violently is torture. Milosevic deserves to feel the full effect of the law without mercy. Milosevic's lawyer told the court his client regrets what he's done and was sorry. During the trial, Milosevic told the court he was acting in self-defence after Mr Barber had threatened to put an axe through his head over a bad internet connection and had damaged his car. But Milosevic said he did not intend to kill Mr Barber. The prosecutor said Milosevic did intend to cause serious harm, but accepted his offending was on the lower end of seriousness. Milosevic, who is appealing against his conviction, will be sentenced at a later date. Claire Campbell, ABC News, Adelaide.
South Australia's unemployment rate dropped to 4.7% in July, in the biggest decline in the country. It's the lowest rate in SA for 12 years, but remains the second highest in Australia behind Queensland. The news was celebrated by the government in Port Augusta, where work to duplicate the Joy Baluch Bridge is continuing, with the first bridge beams installed over the Upper Spencer Gulf.
$200 million project. It's going to create more than 100 jobs. In fact, there are 70 people working on this project as we speak.
The project is due to be completed by the end of next year. Residents of an Adelaide public housing block say the government has abandoned them after their lives were disrupted by the unsuccessful Hove Level Crossing project. The government forced long-term residents out of their homes, even when it knew the project wasn't going ahead. Now, the residents say they're being ignored and their housing is being allowed to run down.
Judith Patterson still has her things packed. The public housing resident is waiting to move out of her unit in Hove, even though she no longer has to.
I don't feel safe. I don't trust them anymore. I think that down the track we'll have to go through this rigmarole again, and I just can't do it.
Ms Patterson is one of 7 tenants remaining here. 8 units are unoccupied. Their residents moved to make way for the Hove Level Crossing project, which the government later abandoned. Residents say the housing, which used to be full of long-term applicants, is being run down and neglected.
You know, it's a ghost town, untidy, looks like people live here that don't give a damn, and very unsettling, and I feel uneasy about it.
One resident, Marlene Grobel, died while preparing to move out. Others were relocated even after the government knew it was not proceeding with the contentious level crossing upgrade.
I lost my best friend. She died of a heart attack, and life just isn't the same.
2 of the remaining tenants now want to leave. The government says it will start maintenance and find new tenants for the properties when that occurs, but can't say how long it will take. The opposition says that's unacceptable.
And they were told they were going to be looked after. Well, if being looked after is being ignored, then this Marshall government has ticked the box.
Some of the residents forced to leave here have told us the process was extremely stressful. And even though they missed their old homes and this community and have been offered the chance to move back in, they don't want to go through that again. The level crossing project didn't go ahead, but it had an impact here nonetheless. Eric Twarchek, ABC News, Adelaide.
Conservationists and local residents are calling for brine to be urgently pumped from salt fields near the St Kilda mangroves north of Adelaide. About 10 hectares of mangroves, including parts of the Adelaide International Bird Sanctuary, were killed off last year. And the group says action is needed now to prevent further destruction.
Ecologist Perry Coleman has been regularly measuring salt levels in the St Kilda mangroves. She says they're still too high to foster new growth.
The water in there is so strong that if you were to take a bucket out of the brine in that pond, you would be removing 3 kilograms of salt.
Late last year, water leaked from nearby ponds owned by salt miner Buckland Dry Creek into the protected area. Campaigners say 193 hectares of coastline were affected, with 10 hectares of mangroves and 35 hectares of salt marsh killed off altogether. They say after winter rains, now is the perfect time to finish pumping the water out to sea, a job that was started in January.
Bolivar Channel has lots and lots of fresh water which is currently going to sea and which could be used to dilute this water down to the point that it's safe for the receiving environment.
In a statement, the Department for Energy and Mining says it's continuing to monitor the site. It says the site has shown stability for a significant period of time, with no meaningful increase to the original area of impact.
They've been saying that they are monitoring, they are watching, they are assessing, but they are not acting.
The Alliance says the window to pump before the brine begins evaporating again is short. Locals say if the state government doesn't start pumping by the 1st of September, they'll hire their own pump and start the job themselves.
It is an arrestable action. However, there is a call at this point for civil disobedience.
But the group is hopeful it won't come to that, with the government promising a significant update in the near future. Leah McLennan, ABC News, Adelaide.
Creating a new human rights movement, that's the bold aim of an international campaign to end discrimination faced by people with disability. We the 15 speaks for the 15% of the world's population who live with disabilities. As National Disability Affairs reporter Naz Campanella explains, some of our most celebrated Paralympians will play a key role.
It's a campaign to smash disability stereotypes.
You are superheroes.
Really?
Yeah, we're superheroes, all right.
For getting the kids out the door on time. Elevating the stories of people with disability living their daily lives.
We pray 5 times a day. And no, I'm not praying for a cure. I'm praying for a new handbag.
Ahead of the Tokyo Games, the International Paralympic Committee has launched We the 15 to give a voice to the 15% of the world's population who live with disability.
Everybody wants to have the same opportunity as the person next to them. And, you know, it shouldn't be based on how you were born or if you were in an accident.
Ellie Cole will for sure.
At her 4th Paralympics, Australian swimmer Ellie Cole is among the athletes to champion the message.
The thing that excites me the most about the We the 15 campaign is that it's finally going to create that conversation that the world really needs.
Kurt Fearnley.
Over decades of competition, Paralympian Kurt Fearnley has seen many campaigns. Now a commentator, he hopes We the 15 gets real results.
They don't want to be seen as superhuman. They want to be seen as human, as equal, being able to get a job, being able to access education.
We the 15 will span 10 years, starting tonight with 100 landmarks around the world, including 10 in Australia lit purple, the colour of disability.
That's 1 billion people.
Naz Campanella, ABC News.
Still to come this hour, why some employers want to make vaccination compulsory.
Why should the plumber that's from the western suburbs has to be vaccinated? We shouldn't be forced into taking a vaccine to earn an honest living.
The overriding amount of our staff want the vaccination and want a safe workplace, so that may mean that some people may lose their jobs.
Plus, can the economy bounce back from rolling lockdowns? That's coming up.
To finance now, and the unemployment rate has fallen, but that's not the whole story. Here's Daniel Ziffer.
The unemployment rate dropped from 4.9% in June to 4.6% in July, in new figures released today. That's good news, right? It is, kind of. Remember, working just an hour a fortnight counts you as employed. So 2,200 extra people were employed, but full-time jobs fell by twice that. And the percentage of people participating in the workforce dipped, as those locked down gave up looking for work that isn't there. This graph illustrates the huge fall in hours worked in Victoria during its 4th lockdown, and that only went for 2 weeks. Here you can see the start of Sydney's slide. People haven't necessarily lost their permanent jobs, but casuals and those already in insecure employment are copping it. As ever, there are always other people who have it worse. Australia is rare among economies because its unemployment rate is lower than before the pandemic. Markets fell in the US after its central bank suggested it would wind back stimulus. That's had an impact on how much our currency is worth. The Aussie dipping under 72 US cents. 10 years ago today, it was $1.03. And iron ore continued its slump, down 4.6%, rapidly heading to $150 a tonne. That'll hurt our budget, and it crunched the share price of miner BHP. It's still reporting season, where we get a look inside the books of listed companies. Pandemic pate sales soared for Maggie Beer, and the company that runs the stock exchange rose because people were stuck at home looking at the share market. And that's finance.
In the AFL, Adelaide's David Mackay has announced his retirement and will play his final game for the Crows at Adelaide Oval this Sunday. The Crows hadn't shut the door on extending the 33-year-old's contract into next season, but he's instead opted to pull the pin while he's still on top of his game.
Selfless, committed, caring. 3 words used to describe David Mackay by his coach. Leaving the game on his own terms, despite the possibility of playing on next season.
It was an opportunity, I guess, to pursue what happened next year, but ultimately I knew it was the right time for me.
The right time coming after his 248th and final game this Sunday, as those left behind prepare for life without him, and veteran Tom Lynch.
It'll be something that we'll miss having that player there, but with DMAC making the decision to move on, and it creates an opportunity for another player to step in.
Stepping in this week will be youngster Lockie Gallant, who'll debut against the Kangaroos.
He deserved his opportunity and that he's stepping into some pretty big shoes, but we have complete confidence in him, what he's going to bring.
The Power is bringing in Trent McKenzie and Stephen Motlop against the Western Bulldogs, in place of Tom Cleary and Orazio Fantasia. A win will secure a top 2 spot and hopefully silence criticisms that the Power can't beat a top 4 side.
Yes, we get it, and everyone's got every right to throw that and talk about that. We can't deny that, but we will be doing everything we can to stop it.
Sean Burgoyne puts a stop to his career this week, retiring after his 407th and final game. The Port Adelaide Premiership player and 3-time Premiership Hawk finishes up as the record holder for most games played by an Indigenous player. Richmond's Basher Hooley is also hanging up the boots.
Well, it's time to go fishing. Tiger for life.
Bowing out after 232 games and 3 premierships with the Tigers. Cameron Slessor, ABC News.
Uncapped wicket-keeper batsman Josh Inglis has been included in Australia's 15-man squad for the T20 World Cup. The Perth Scorchers player has been picked ahead of Alex Carey and Josh Philippe. Steve Smith, Pat Cummins, David Warner and Glenn Maxwell are among the big names to return after missing recent tours of the West Indies and Bangladesh. Justin Langer remains head coach and hasn't lost the support of the other players, according to the chairman of selectors.
The focus for us is purely on the World Cup and the Ashes, in terms of if we perform well in those tournaments, these things tend to die away a little bit.
Captain Aaron Finch is expected to have recovered from knee surgery before the tournament starts in the UAE and Oman in October. To the weather details now, and tonight's photo of a sunrise over Totnes in the Adelaide Hills was sent to us by Robert Medhurst. In Adelaide today, the mercury climbed to 21 degrees at 3 o'clock this afternoon, the warmest day so far this winter. The overnight low dipped to 8.3. There was fine weather across much of the state today, although it was windy over the west and central coasts. Tops in the major centres ranged from 18 at Mount Gambier to 25 in Ceduna. To the rest of the country, and most of northern Australia remains cloud-free under the influence of a high-pressure system. But that cloud, with a front approaching the WA border, will continue to move east and cross our central and southern parts tomorrow morning and across Victoria and Tasmania during the evening. There'll be a few showers in Perth and Melbourne, cloudy and 16 in Hobart and a foggy morning in Canberra, then a top of 17, 25 in Brisbane. Back home, and a cooler change will extend in from the west tomorrow, bringing showers to the West Coast district and agricultural area, but it should be fine and 31 degrees in Coober Pedy, 21 for Port Pirie. Wet further south with possible gusty thunderstorms about the Eyre, York and Fleurieu peninsulas and Kangaroo Island. 16's the expected top in a number of centres, including Lameroo. A strong wind warning will continue tomorrow for the lower southeast coast. And in Adelaide, partly cloudy with gusty showers, most likely in the morning and early afternoon. A top of 17 for the city after a low tonight of 11. On the waters, north to northwesterly winds to 15 knots with seas to 1 metre. The sun will rise about 10 to 7 and set about 11 hours later. And the rain is expected to continue for much of the week ahead as another front brings cooler conditions on Monday, clearer and 17 this time next week. That's the latest from the Adelaide newsroom. Thanks for your company. Stay with us. 7:30's next.
Welcome to the program.